Welcome everyone! Today we learn how to apply Code Fast and Database Fast in Entity Framework Code. So go to Visual Studio and create a new console application, define the name, select the .NET version and create the project. In the Code Fast approach, you write .NET classes to define your model, and then Entity Framework automatically creates the database schema. So let's open the Solution Explorer and create a new folder called Code Fast. We'll add some entities. We'll create a simple schema. Basically, a user has one address and many products. We'll create these three simple entities. So let's create the classes. Let's start with the user. So for the user, we have an ID property. We'll add a name. We'll add an address, which is the navigation property for the address entity, and we'll add the foreign key for the address ID. And finally, we'll add a list of products. Define the address entity in this folder. This address will contain two properties, the ID and the street address. And finally, we'll add the product entity. This entity will contain the ID, the title, decimal price, and finally we'll add the foreign key to the user ID. So let's add this user ID property to reference the user from this product. The next step is to add the Entity Framework Code data model, which is the context to manage the interactions with the database. So in the same folder, I will add a new context called Code First. Context will inherit from DB context, so we need to install the Microsoft.Entity Framework Code NuGet package, install the latest version, and then we'll define the DB sets for each entity, for the address, and finally the product entity. We'll specify the local instance to connect with this context. So as a prerequisite, we'll install SQL Server Express. So I'll open the SQL Server Object Explorer on Visual Studio. And as you will see, we have the server, the SQL Express server. Open the databases and we'll create a new database called sample. So in the context, we'll specify the data provider and the connection stream from this database. So for that, we can override the onConfiguring method. We can specify these two properties to connect with the local database. So we'll use this options build parameter and we'll call a method called use SQL server. So we need to install another NuGet package from Entity Framework Code. So go to the project file and we'll install Microsoft.Entity Framework Code.SQL server. We'll use the same version from this Entity Framework Code package. Go back and now we need to pass the connection string from this method. I will copy the value. So with the connection string, we specified the SQL Server data provider and the connection string. We'll also set data to the database. So we'll override another method from the DB context called onModelCreating, and we'll use this model builder parameter to set some data. Remove this line and I will copy a simple code. So we will add a new address with ID and street address. So we need to change this street address property as a string. Go back and we will add a new product with ID, title, price, and user ID, which is the foreign key to the user entity. We'll add a simple user entity with name and the reference to the address and an ID. We'll apply migrations to create the database schema and set data. So for that, we need to install another NuGet package. Open the package manager console and we'll type install package Microsoft.Entity Framework Code.design. Execute this command. Now go to the developer PowerShell command. We'll use the .NET CLI to run commands and apply the migrations to create the schema and to set the data. Let's build the solution. So the build was succeeded. Go back to the .NET CLI and we'll type .NET EF migrations add, and we'll specify the migration file name, which in this case will be initial. So run this command. As you will see in the Solution Explorer, we have this migration folder with the information needed to create the database schema and to set the data. So we'll run a second command called .NET EF database update to apply this migration file and to create the database schema. Run the command. The migration was applied. So go to the SQL Server Object Explorer, refresh this sample database and expand the tables. You will see that the address, product, and user tables are created based on the .NET model that we write in .NET. Let's right-click on the address and view the data. We also set data by overriding the onModel creating model from the DB context class. You can check in the remaining entities from the product and also from the user. Let's collapse this Object Explorer and close all the tabs. In the database first approach, Entity Framework tools create a .NET model based on our existing database schema. This process is known as scaffolding or reverse engineering. We can use the .NET CLI command or the PowerShell command to scaffold the database schema. So in this demo, we'll use the second option. Open the Package Manager console and install another Nugget package called Microsoft.EntityFramework.tools. Let's clear this console and we'll install this package. Execute the command. Now write the scaffold command to generate the .NET model. Clear the console and we'll type scaffold db context. We need to pass two required parameters. The first one is the connection string and the second one is the provider. So we will pass the connection string from the context class. So go to the context and we'll copy this value. Go back to the Package Manager console and paste it. Let's remove this backslash and define the provider, which in this case is Microsoft.EntityFramework.SQL Server, and we'll add an optional parameter to specify the output directory. Type output there, and we'll add the .NET model in a db-fest folder. Execute the scaffold command. The scaffold was succeeded. So as you will see, we have a sample context that is generated by Entity Framework tools. We have the DB context with the DB context options passing by a constructor. We have the DB sets for the address, product, and user entities. We have the same configuration from the SQL Server connection in the onConfiguring method. And we have some additional mappings created by Entity Framework in this onModel creating method for the address, product, and user entities. And now expand this folder. As you will see, we have the entities, we have the address with the properties and a navigation property to the users. We have the product with all the properties and a navigation property for the user as well. And finally, the user entity. Feel free to refactor these scaffolded classes based on your business requirements. This is just a starting point. So in this demo, we learned how to use CodeFast and DatabaseFast with Entity Framework.